The Avatars by A.E. This audiobook recorded by Josh Mitteldorf, part 4 of 6. Chapter 14. A gusty energy was in the air. Paul, stayed by rain at his door, looked up at the cyclopean world of cloud piled fabulously in precipices of lustrous pearl, cataracts of light, pools of blue fringed by glades of dazzling whiteness. Miracles wrought by the wizard air, dissolving as swiftly as they were created, shedding from roots of cloud shadowy driftings of rain. A huge arch of 7 quivering fires straddled across the valley. Beneath it, over wrinkled hollow and hill, waves of vivid green and gold rippled, chased incessantly by purple shadows. A hawk soared up as if it had sought home in that cloudland. Brooding on the dissolving wonder, Paul remembered Gregor's belief that all without us, whatever is seen on earth or in the heavens, even the noblest images, were but Maya. A despondency fell upon him. He went indoors. Here all about him was the work of 7 years since on that midsummer eve a new purpose had been given to his art. Were he and his friends like that hawk he had imagined, allured by a cloudland of images, unsubstantial as those dissolving mists? A vast hope had been born among them, its father a dream, its mother a vision. It had been fed by intuitions and imaginations. But might it not all be Maya? No embodiment of that hope had appeared in the world. He moved about among the paintings he had retained in that belief that, gathered together, in them finally might be seen the spirit of new cycle. As he looked on them, something of his despondency passed. Nature at least was living. The earth to him had been a mighty mother, majestically garrulous of the multitudes in her household, speaking to him in images which had come to him as he sat amid rocks on the mountain. Here were beings which were but coils of dazzling fire, with faces of an ancient wisdom, dragon-crested divinities, beings like those spoken of in old mythologies, centaurs, winged with flame, also the gentler beings who peered silently from the waters, with blooms of delicate flame about their heads, or who rose a glimmering brightness out of the rocks, or emerged from the trees. Sibyls, breathing the mystical exhalations from earth while priests listened to the god-intoxicated utterance. Here, too, were images of a primeval humanity which had drifted before them, and cities whose beauty was only in the eternal memory. Earth had spoken to him, not in words, but in that many-colored speech of varied forms, and he had recorded it so far as his mastery over his art had enabled him. He moved from picture to picture, his despondency not altogether dispelled. The companionship between divinity and the human soul is unequal. While the divinity speaks to us, we are exalted, but when the oracles are voiceless, there is a sadness such as the unilluminated never know. For the Spirit takes whom it wills, and it cannot be constrained even when to ourselves we are most solitary and need it most. I have been too much alone, he thought, and he understood why it was men and women sought each other, blotting out by one beloved face the majesty whose forms and faces are legion. Then he roused himself, and taking a canvas, he began to work steadily on it. At last came a moment of relaxed attention, and he had the sense he was no longer alone. There was a faint stir behind him. He turned. Leaning by the open door was a slender girl, in a soft blue dress, her fair hair falling in clusters about the pure oval of her face. He rose, and as he moved to his visitor, he saw a little silvery spark in the rich gray of her eyes, affectionate, doubtful, mocking, questioning. Then in an instant he remembered when he last saw that face. "Olive! What ages since I saw you!" They stood looking at each other with the questioning gaze of those who had been darlings of each other's hearts. and who wonder what years of separation have made of each other. I do not realize you as the little girl whose hair I used to ruffle. Are you not ashamed, you, an artist, to remember that you did such a thing? Said that mocking, affectionate voice. It is as wicked, is it not, a sin against beauty to disturb a tress as to burn the Alexandrine library. And at the saying of this, he knew she had grown up and run away from him and become another person, and he would have to know her all over again. There came to his mind the words of an Indian folk song. She has become a woman, her eyes have caught the dancing of her feet. She came into the great room and walked about lightly, from picture to picture. Oh, she cried, almost becoming the eager child again. She began to look at him with the old affection. You are just the same. You have painted the people who used to look out of the trees. But these I do not know. She pointed to some of the more majestic figures. These are great people. You will tell me about them. He began to speak hesitantly about what he was doing, for she did not know the long background of meditation out of which the images came. But she was intuitive and eager, and soon she had, by a passionate inquisition, extracted the wonder tale by which he and his friend were inspired. Oh, it is wonderful, and how, thinking all this, could you look so dejected as you were when I first came in? I watched you. You looked as if the universe had no light for you, yet it is really lit up by a blaze of fairy torches. I think I have been too much alone lately. I have seen but little of my friends for some time. I have no ever-burning lamp within me, and my friends must feed the lamp with the oil of their ideas. You have been living too much among shadows and apparitions, Paul. No, not living. It cannot be said when to be life when you are always looking at images, however noble. To have vision is not to live. I must bring Alfie here. If you see her, all the world will turn to gold. The friend you call the princess? Yes, but she is more than a princess, more than a queen. She is like Helen of Troy, or one of the great heroines from the old epics. She sets fire to all about her. How have you come to love the thought of Helen Troy burned? He bantered her. Is your ideal woman one who wrecks a civilization? Oh, it is we who make civilizations, and we have the right to break them. The girl laughed. Do you not realize that it is we who, with youth, with beauty, inspire all the hurried steps men take to the age of gold? I would like to overthrow the hateful civilization we live in today. I can imagine Alfie leading against it armies she had made mad. She laughed at her own fantasy. I see I must teach you the world history as I see it. You only know what men have done. Civilization began in some primeval forest when a woman first plucked a flower and put it in her hair and appeared like a spirit to her savage lover. Men would have been content with cave dwellings if women had not insisted on palaces, the counterpart in marble of a queen's beauty. The world will be reborn when some beauty appears, a being so wonderful that men will feel life must be built anew around her. There should be a golden turbulence of rapture when a divine beauty passes by, but you are one of those people who are only fully awake when you are half asleep. That is, you go inside yourself and light candles there. But you must not go inward out of sight, Paul. She laid her hand on his arm and shook him with the lovely familiar petulance of her childhood. Paul, delighted to have again the old intimacy, made himself humble with promises to be her slave as of old. But she would not have this. No, you must not. I love to twist people round my little finger, but if they go round, I cannot endure them. As he talked with the girl, he felt some curiosity about that friend she called the princess, for he divined she was talking a gallant language that was not learned in any school, but it had come from contact with some other who had brought her out of childhood into an incandescent girlhood. You are to come with me. Father and mother have come also, and I am never going away again, and you are to tell me everything about your wonderful boy, and I am to become an initiate of the guild, am I not? Chapter 15. Some little time after the return of Cornair's daughter, Baileen broke in upon Paul one afternoon. Paul, you must stand up and gird yourself, for Cornair's prophecy is to be fulfilled. There are dragons and black enchantments to be overcome. I was with Gregor last evening. The great beast is aroused, he said. The hunt will begin soon. But it is the dragon who is to hunt us. There may now be only the lifting of an eyelid or the twitching of a tail, but the beast is gathering itself for a leap. What are you talking about? Asked Paul, lifting dream-clouded eyes from his canvas. I say the lords of that monstrous mechanism, the state, have found the unrest in the world has its roots here. It is we, the spiritual anarchists, pagan poets, and vagabond idealists, who have injected our own wildness into the social order. The slaves of the machine are becoming restless. No, it is not a passion for a new sharing of wealth. The machine is efficient. Nobody is hungry now, though spirit may be starved. Everyone now is clothed in body, though there may be not a rag of colored fire about the psyche. No one is insecure, no one is homeless, unless they close their eyes to be bleak and homeless in the inner dark. It is the beginning of a spiritual renaissance. The state has nothing more to promise humanity, and when that is realized, allegiance falls away. The spirit of man has lost itself in many illusions, and last of all, it lost itself in the most pitiful illusion of any, the illusion of economic security and bodily comfort. These now fail to satisfy it, and there's nothing for it but spiritual adventure. Subconsciously, it begins to remember ancient majesties, for in the midst of plenty without is hollow and empty within. How are we, the disturbers of peace? I am glad to hear it, but I feel innocent for myself of any part of so good a work. Do you not know that there are a score of fierce idealists in these regions, spitting out their scorn on the comfortable world, Gregor the most powerful, whose books are read everywhere, and whose analysis cuts to the bone? Now there are warnings uttered about anarchists who would wreck the first perfectly organized society the world has known. The air quivers with anathemas from state and church. They stir up passion, which they can direct if they need be. They can let loose on the idealists, the wild beasts who kill in the name of the state. They can let loose a horde of wild fanatics who will rend us in the name of God. Your dragon is a very wild and glittering beast, but it does not terrify me. I wish you would speculate rather how those empty souls are to be made full. I ask about this, for before you came I was pondering over a man who left me an hour ago. I had thought of him as a magnificent, imaginative animal, but I think he suddenly conceived greatly about himself, and I am responsible. I saw him first breaking stones lazily by the roadside. I never saw such a shapely creature. His body had the superb anatomies of the Adam of Michelangelo. Apollo in Exile might have worn such a disguise in dread of some more terrible divinity. As I imagined him, so I painted him. He sat for me without showing the least interest in what I was painting. Here's the picture. I call it A God in Exile. The painting was of a man in rough patched trousers, a shirt open at breast and neck, while the sleeves were rolled up, showing those divine contours of throat, chest, and arms of which Paul had spoken. The man was breaking stones, a humble task, but all about him, seen against the blue air, the fantasy of the artist had painted white, gold, and rose-colored flames, swirling about the figure as if they blazed from a fire, only half hidden beneath the human disguise. What a magnificent creature! When I had finished, I drew him to see what I had made of him. He stood for a while looking silently, and then he drew himself up and said haughtily, What am I doing here? And stalked out, as if he was going to storm the heavens. Yet he might as conceivably, in the new dilation of his being, become the pursuer of nymphs, as some of the ancient divinities were. When the gods cannot find the way back to the skies, they too often descend in their thoughts to the fairer among the daughters of men. Ought I to be sorry for the nymph his eye singled out? Asked the poet. He might be a wonderful lover, but I feel what you imply, that our idealists have made the lives of men empty, but do not help those they have disillusioned to make a fullness. I find little imagination about life itself. I read books prophetic about the future, but the writers conceive only of more perfect mechanisms, not of a lordlier humanity. One will imagine airships of more electrical swiftness, or a force which might dissolve the bones of the world, or a boat which might sink under water to the harbors of sunken Atlantis. They imagine nothing about ourselves, yet what could be more exciting than such a speculations? Whether, for instance, in 10,000 years we may not be able to send our thoughts as we will to distant friends, and to have a like intimacy for ourselves? Whether the psyche might not become so sensitive to the forces which pour on and through us that it might be able to reflect the multitudinous life of humanity in itself, as the eye reflects a heaven of clouds and stars. Again, it is worthwhile brooding over whether we might not be able to extend consciousness into nature and interpret to ourselves the life of a rock, water, air, or tree. It is conceivable also that there is an element of infinity at the root of every sense. It is manifest in the sense of sight, which reaches out beyond sun and moon into the galaxies of stars in the Milky Way. Might we not develop hearing to embrace the things beyond the seas and stars? Have not you and I heard voices of our friends speaking to us in intensity while they were yet many miles away? Have not you and I heard a musical vibration in the air, and melodies from unseen players? It was not the physical ear heard, but the powers of hearing within. In the course of eons, that power might come to as wide a range as the power of sight, and the myriad voices of nature be all intelligible to us. Our prophets do not speculate on human destiny, whether that other world which shines invisibly about us might not gradually become as native to us as this, whether we might not find the wings of the psyche unfolding, and a spiritual body to be born from the womb of the mortal body. We have in us, in germ, such powers as I spoke of. Their development is not incredible. Dilated to their perfection, they would make all I have imagined possible for us. Yes, I know, you old wizard. When you talk about your pictures, I can see them glowing in some ether about you. I look round, but do not see an enchanter's wand. Yet you practice enchantments on myself and others. The forms of imagination with Paul had begun to glow as vividly as life. When talking about what he had seen, he would sometimes conjure up the image and had been able to make it shine in the poet's mind. This was the casting of enchantments, of which Phelim had affectionately accused him. They were very close to each other, these two, and thought was hardly born in one before it appeared in the mind of the other. Something of a like intimacy had grown up between these two and their other friends. Ideas flowed from mind to mind. Even without speech, they became sharers of each other's wisdom. Paul and Phelim began a speculation whether this was the natural consequence of some identity of mood, or whether they were all bathed by some river of life whose ripples broke on the shores of the soul. Then the door was momentarily darkened, and Conair's daughter came in. She ran to Paul, taking his two hands and wringing them, her face pale and bright, like a distraught angel, her lovely eyes agonized by some tragic happening. "Oh, Paul, she has gone. Alfie has gone. I do not know where. She went away 3 days ago with some man, a stranger. She has not returned. She has sent no message. Oh, Paul, what can be done? What could have happened? You cannot feel it. You have never known her. To me, she was like an angel of the sun. I was only a little moon to her fire. Oh, if she should not come back, what can I do? What can we do? Chapter 16. Very gently, Paul spoke to the distressed girl. Tell me, how did this happen? I had been with Alfie all day. She walked back with me the road over the hill. As we came near the top where the cromlech is, I thought I saw a light on the road, but there was no light. As we came to the cromlech, I saw a tall figure of a man against the blue-green sky. He stood there until we were beside him. Then Alfie stopped. They looked at each other. He said to her, "It is time for the play to begin. The chorus knows their parts." "I am ready," said Alfie. She then turned to me, kissed me, and said, "Good night, my child." She seemed to me to have grown indescribably remote and great. I felt like a child who had been dismissed to its bed. I could say or do nothing. I watched them take the path down the valley, and, oh, Paul, as they went there seemed a blue and golden light enveloping both, and they did not seem human to me, but to be like some marvelous spirits journeying the earth. It is now 3 days since they went, and she has not returned. She has not even sent a message. What does it all mean? Who could the stranger be? How did he appear to you? I thought at first he was a peasant. He was dressed like one, very simply. His head was bare, and a great mane of yellow golden hair rose up from his forehead, fell to his shoulders. It was like a lion's mane. His face I thought very noble, and his eyes, when he turned them on me for an instant, had a light in them which seemed to come from something further and deeper than the sky. As he turned away with Alfie, I saw what seemed like a violin case slung over his shoulders. It is the child of your vision, the boy on the mountain, Mary's fairy fiddler, now grown up, said Philim, who had listened intently. Dream and vision are to be justified. The play is to begin. It must be a great play to be heralded by miracles in so many souls. We are the chorus, we and others we do not know, who have been prepared for many years to play our parts. Do not be distressed, he said to the girl. They are immortals. They do not err and lose their way in life as we do. You should be exalted rather, being a character in so great a tale which may be told for ages about these two. What did you want your princess to become? To settle down as the beloved of someone of her own rank, to bear him children, have a brief summer of beauty and be forgotten? For what she does now, I think she will never be forgotten. These twain may be a pivot round which the imagination of the world will wield to new spiritual destinies. Yes, said the girl, I feel she must take her own way. There is something great, unheard of before, in Alfie. She might have been a queen, but she laughed at an infatuated young prince who thought his rank made him an equal. If she reverses the tale of Cophetua's queen, I will not be saddened. She would know it was a king of men in disguise. I only become wild, knowing nothing. She does not stoop choosing such a companion, who is, I am sure, great beyond our dreaming of him. Already there are many whose imaginations, they know not why, follow him as planets circle round the sun. Do not be deceived by the guise in which he appears. The wise ones assume excellent forms in secret. Did an avatar ever sit on a throne? Have they not always gone about the world as vagrants? How could they make us believe in the riches of their world if they did not despise the riches of this? You truly believe, then, she asked of Paul, that this is the strange boy of whom you spoke to me? I am certain as Philim of this. Oh, I am already lighter of heart. I feel it must be so, and this is that unimagined thing I always felt must be her destiny. I have no heart sadness now, only an excitement of spirit, but I am too excited to talk. I must be alone with all you have said. You remember, Paul, the stone on which I used to sit when I was a little girl and tried to puzzle things out for myself, and I would not even have you with me until everything was clear. I am going there again. I am sure the hills will not let me think falsely. They will not tell me a lie. She went from them, perhaps because they, like her, had gone on some inner quest. They did not speak to each other about what she had told them. Philemon, watching the girl flitting through the wood, began to speak of her. She has a spirit flashing like quicksilver. I'm glad you initiated her into our mystery, for she herself must be one of the chorus. I remember her as a small girl. You were away then. She had come back from her school on holiday. She brought me into the wood, where you painted those dancing figures, and made me tell her every secret of the universe that I knew. To please her was a poet's whole time work without holiday. I had begun to think of other things. She saw my lapse and stamped at me indignantly like a young queen. I was delighted with that imperiousness which brought me to her feet. It was about her I wrote those verses I called Distraction. Do you remember? I lapsed from her sweet play, although my heart had hardly beat. For a dream instant the wild child stamps with imperious feet. Wind quickened, shook the forest boughs, green glitterings died and came. O'er her young stormy beauty broke ripples of shade and flame. Awake, my lovely child, I wake to fly the slave to be. Forgive, O voices from the deep, yet come again to me. I think she has the genius for living, and she may find her way into the heart of our mystery more than any of us. We turn what we imagine into poetry and art. She will live what she imagines. You and I would not dare to follow those two on their wanderings, but that girl will not rest until she has found them. She will be like a shadow following their footsteps until her heart, not her head, finds what it sought. Chapter 17. The spiritual are swift transmitters of thought. Among those mystical communities which had sought refuge from a civilization they hated amid the mountainy regions, rumors of a spiritual excitement created by two divinely beautiful visitors began to spread, as in India knowledge of distant happenings spreads from city to city. The rumors began weeks after the vanishing of Alfie. They came first from far south. To those who heard the rumors it seemed as if, after dark eons that had lain like frost on the heart, the ice was melting, and the spring of a new golden age was stealing upon the earth. The strangers had come to those communities who were creating through the arts a culture in harmony with their spiritual intuitions. By the presence of these two, the days had been colored with a rich wonder. Something, rumor at first did not say what, had been added to drama, dance, and song. Then came stories of men and women raised above themselves in some transfiguration, so that they saw each other in some shining way in moonlit dances, in forest glades, in dances which had been taught them by the mystic visitors, for as they swayed in the dance their feet came to be lighter, to have the gay movement of dream. As the dancers looked at each other, they saw bodies no longer lit by the moonlight, but which seemed to glow from within and to be radiant with starry colors, plumes of delicate flame. In their enchantment, they were god and goddess to each other. It seemed natural in that moment of exaltation. Surprise came only when the music died out and dance and dream had ended, and the strangers had gone away, leaving the dancers sorrow and wonder over the dying glory in themselves. From another came a tale of a music played amid the rocks, which melted those who heard it into ecstasy. so that their own being became a music, and nature itself a divine tone in which earth and heaven were dissolved. Others told of lovely genies seen in the air who seemed to wait on the two strangers and who made a shining drama of their words, so that the meanings were exalted. And as the days passed, Paul, Philim, and Olive could follow the route of the mystic revelers, which brought them nearer and nearer to those who waited their coming in a passion of longing. Through those days Conair's daughter had been still. The distress she felt at first at the vanishing of her friend had gone. It may be she was moved by the belief of her friends that we have only to be ourselves, and what is our own must come to us, and we cannot lose what is our own. But one morning that restraint was gone. A fairy excitement invaded her. She took the road over the mountains southward. Her body seemed to herself light as air. She felt as one might who knows her feet are God-guided, and though she did not know what would be her way, she went happily on, blind and rapt, wandering. On the evening after, she came into the room where Paul was with Philim and said, "I have seen them." They remained silent, but turned intent eyes on her. They knew without asking who those were she spoke of, and waited for her speech. "When I awoke yesterday morning, I felt like a boat whose anchor had been lifted, and the wind was blowing it out of harbour, so I did not know where to go or what I was to do. I waited for some understanding, and then I felt as if Alfie had taken me by the hand. I walked away over the mountain road. I knew I was called to her, that I was going to meet her. I was not tired by the long road, nor was I uncertain, and that fairy exultation never left me until, at evening, I saw about 25 or 30 people in a glade, and above the glade the hill rose steeply. Alfie was there. I sat down beside her. She patted my hand, but said nothing. They were all listening to a half-musical play composed by a young man I heard spoken of as Rory. He and his sisters were both actors in the play. I thought it beautiful. In it the soul was led by music to the fairy world. There were songs by invisible singers, hidden behind rocks or trees on the hills. Song and music became more ethereal as they came from the heights. But the real wonder came when the voices had died upon the hills, for then there sounded a melody played on violin, a music not born out of any human emotion, but the melody of ether itself, tapestry of sound wavering between earth and heaven. I felt if that magic curtain lifted, I would be in paradise. When it died inaudible by the ear, it was still audible by the spirit. I saw the boy and girl as in a trance holding each other's hands, while they listened to a finale more marvelous than anything that they had imagined. When that music ended, the man you spoke of as Aud came down the slope to Alfie. Some went away at once as if they could not endure human speech after so much beauty and must be alone to caress the memory. But Aud and Alfie moved together, and, as in trance, where one is moved from beyond oneself, I followed with 6 or 7 others. The young musician and his sisters, Mark and Mary, were among them. But for what seemed like a spell laid upon us, I think we would have been too awed to follow. We came to a mossy hollow on the hillside just above the road. It overlooked a valley which was growing vast and vague and blue in the twilight. We sat down on moss or stones. I felt as we do in dreams, where consciousness stirs and we know our waking selves are in the dream world, and we see wonders unrolled before us in the wizardry of dream. I was in some way beyond dream. I heard Alfie speak about the young man's musical fantasy, and how it was right to make beautiful images, because we became what we imagine. The realists who think they are closer to truth are no less depicting a world created by imagination, though it is begotten by dark desires. The universe itself was nothing but imagination ceaselessly creative. The imagination and will which uphold it are in us also, so that we can make our own world and transfigure it out of the glory still within us. We were not what we seemed, but children of the heavens. The body even is a palace, all marvelous within. It has secret radiant gateways opening inward to light. It has wings which could be unfolded. All the precious fires of Elohim are commingled in us. She said there were many who came in the past from that heaven world of light, divine poets who made known the paths between earth and heaven. This they did less by speech than by opening the blind eyes and showing images of gods and immortals in a clear, immovable, and blessed light. As I listened, my eyes, which had been fixed on Alfie, passed for a moment to the blue twilight air which was over the valley. It seemed to me there was a secret shining in it, like that blessed light she spoke of, and I saw in it radiant forms in harmony with her words. When she spoke of the body as lit with precious fires, a figure upon that mystic screen which had been shadowy began to glow. It became transparent, a dazzling opalescence, and there were lights in it, like sunfire for brilliancy. It was so glorious that I remembered the prophet, who said of the soul that it had been on the holy mountain of God, and walked amid the stones of fire where every precious stone was its covering. Then that radiant Psyche itself became transfigured, and was changed to a dark divine mystery, and as I looked I heard her speaking of the return of the Son to the Father. She told tales of those divine poets, Apollo, Krishna, Luch, and as she spoke there were majestic images in that shining ether, as if they were all still living in the eternal memory. I cannot now speak of all I saw there. I must brood over it, lest it fades from me like a dream when we wake. But there were figures on that ether like some you, Paul, and had painted, and I knew that you had looked into that shining glass. Through it all Aud sat silently, but I thought he was the magician who made these living pictures to glow in the twilight air. When Alfie ended, she and Aud went away from us. I went home with Mary and stayed with her that night. What I tell you is but a little part of mysteries which are too great for my understanding. I feel very young, a child who has strayed into the company of immortals, and heard them talking in their own speech, and it was too high for me. She looked at them silently for a moment, and then left them, going to Connair's house.